Hello, Coates Stars. I'm Mrs. Puckett, reading specialist at Coates Elementary School. I'm so happy to have you here with me today. Today I'd like to talk to the parents of fourth graders and also the parents of students who are reading on a fourth grade level, whether it's third graders who are advanced readers or fifth or sixth graders who still need a little more support to reach the grade level reading. I'm so glad you're here with me today. I'm hoping that you've already read Reading Routines at Home for fourth grade, and I'd like you to open up to the second page because that's where we're going to begin. At the beginning of fourth grade, you can kind of see that text. That's a level 38, which we also call a level P. You'll see that there are multiple paragraphs, there's dialogue, there's multiple characters. The story is very complex. There may be a picture at the beginning of each chapter. There may only be a picture at the cover of the book. Children are really relying on the words now for the meaning. This is fourth grade. At the end of fourth grade, it becomes even more complex. This is a level 40, also known as a level S. You can find examples of these books on the website Goodreads that's listed in your pamphlet. By the end of the year, these characters have become very complex. They're not just some characters are good, some are silly, some are bad. They're very complex with multiple dimensions, and the children have to follow along. The important thing in fourth grade is for them to really understand the journey the characters are making. What makes the character change is usually going to lead to the moral of the story. That's pretty deep. In nonfiction, they're going to be reading all kinds of things about science and social studies and history. And so they're going to be needing to use a lot more background knowledge. Now, what are you going to do to help your child with that? Simple. Read to them and have them read a lot. The only way to gain knowledge is to just continue absorbing knowledge. Now, we're going to take a few minutes here and watch Mrs. Allen working with her son, who is a fourth grader, who's going to be reading a book. Now, you'll notice in the beginning, her son is reading silently because they're fourth graders, and fourth graders read silently. So please take a few minutes, watch this, and I'll be back to talk to you in just a few minutes. Thank you.
I'm reading Encyclopedia Brown. I'm on the case of the Explorer's Money.
Okay. Do you mind if I look over your shoulder?
Okay.
Just in case you need some help?
Right? Is that Rit?
Rit. Oh, R-I-G-H-T. Oh, when you see I-G-H-T, that means you pronounce it I. So what would the word be?
Yes, that's right.
Right. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Yeah. Go ahead. Keep going.
Is that collection?
That's T-I-O-N. So when there's T-I-O-N at the end of a word, that means you pronounce it shun. So what would the word be?
Collection.
Does that make sense? How about you reread the sentence for me?
However, he was afraid that someone might steal part of his famous Arctic collection.
Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, good. Keep going.
What's that word?
What's that word? Okay, let's see. Oh, this has a prefix, a root word, and a suffix word. So that can kind of help us figure out what the word is. So let's see. The prefix is dis. The root word is cover. And the suffix is ed or ed. So if we put it all together, covered. Does that make sense? Let's
Yes.
reread the sentence starting there.
Nobody opened a drawer or a door and discovered $50,000.
Okay, does that make sense? Yeah. Okay, go ahead, keep reading. Okay. All right, so can you tell me what was the problem in the story? What's the problem?
A thief stole money.
Okay. And how did the problem get solved?
The thief had put the money in 8 penguins because he had brought to put in the museum,
Mm-hmm.
but he expected them to be shipped to him with loot and money, but instead the police arrested him. How Encyclopedia found out is because there's no penguins in the North Pole, only the South Pole.
Okay. And so what did we learn from this story?
Stealing is not good,
Stealing is wrong.
and you always get caught.
You always get caught. Absolutely. All right. Good job, bud. Go ahead, Kip.
Thank you, Mrs. Allen. That was great. Now, what I want you to notice in that video were a few things. As I said, her child was reading silently when she came to join him. 4th graders aren't typically reading out loud. You could ask them to read an interesting paragraph to you, but if you ask them to read the whole book, they may lose interest. Now, they may still enjoy you reading to them, so don't forget they're never too old for read-alouds. Now, the first thing that Mrs. Allen did was she just cuddled up next to her son. You could see they were pretty comfortable and they knew that reading was a fun activity. That's important. All right, the next thing she did was she waited for him to ask for help. When he got to a word he didn't know, he asked her for help. They'd obviously built a rapport where he knew when he came to a tricky word he shouldn't keep reading, he needed to ask his mom. But what she did was very interesting, and this is what I'd like you to do. Don't just tell them the word when they don't know it. They can't learn if you do the work for them. You want your child to do the heavy lifting. Now, in this case, Mrs. Allen was really focused on little word parts that have unusual spellings, and that's something you could be focused on. She noticed T-I-O-N says shun, and as a teacher, I might say other things like action, nation, relation, so you see it all the time to transfer the learning. But at home, all I want you to do is find that little part and say, well, T-I-O-N says shun, try it again. And then she did something else that was great. When he read the word, she said, does that make sense? And she even asked him, go back and read the sentence and make sure it makes sense. One thing we always want children to remember is reading is not just about pronouncing every word correctly. Reading is about, does it make sense? Do I understand what I'm reading? And as we went on, they continued to read together, even silently, just kind of cuddled up on the couch. At the end, Mrs. Allen talked to her son about the book, and that's what I want you to do. You need to connect with your child about these books. Even if you haven't read it, you can ask them questions. If it's nonfiction, what were the interesting parts that you learned? What surprised you? What do you think you still want to know? Where could we find that answer? We really want our students doing higher level thinking, and we want them to know that books lead us to read more books and lead us to learn more and become curious. That's really what it leads to. Now, this book that this child was reading was fiction, and so she asked about the characters and about what was going on in the story. In 4th grade, a very important part of what we're teaching is the characters learning things and changing and growing. How other characters can cause that change, how events in their lives can cause that change, and how just their own thoughts can cause that change. So we're really looking deeper into the motivation of characters. Okay? Now, if you don't have to remember all this. On the very last page of your brochure, you'll see a box of questions that you can ask your child. If you've read the book with them, it's great to get a discussion going, but don't feel like you have to read every book your child reads. You can just kind of go off these questions, listen to their answers, and then build more questions. Now, there is a QR code on the last page of your reading pamphlet. If you go there, we have other resources for you. Questions you can ask your kids, some writing prompts, things that will help you help your child to read. Now, this isn't the last of this series. I'll be back to talk about more things you can do with your child at home. But for right now, enjoy reading with your child, enjoy talking with your child about reading, and make them do the work when it comes to finding those tricky words. All right, see you next time. Bye-bye.